Many of you have come to this broadcast, and I know some of you are going to be with me live right now, and some of you are going to be watching this replay in the future. So it's very interesting because when I first started working on the Empath Narcissist course, even though that theme was very much in the air, it's interesting how it has really gathered pace in the last 3 or 4 months. So I wanted to just give those of you who've perhaps found this because of the title but don't know who I am, a little bit of a sense of why I'm doing this work and how I came to be doing this work. So I've worked for 14 years as an energy intuitive, a channeler, and a healer for people. And my philosophy around healing is we're all here on a healing path, every single one of us, no matter how enlightened or spiritually focused you might be. My experience is that life is a spiral path for all of us, and we will go through different challenges and experience different gifts. So my joy is really creating a space for people to experience their own healing. And I've done this around the world in live workshops and one-on-one with people. And one of the things that kept coming up for me wherever I would go in the world, and this has been going on for about the last 8-9 years, is this dynamic of empaths and narcissists, or empaths who are involved with toxic people. And for me also, I have some personal history with this, which I'll share a bit more about shortly. So for those of you who are here, I know there can be this common question of, well, am I an empath? What's an empath? What's a narcissist? There is no black and white answer. And I've seen a lot more information on this topic springing up in the last couple of years, which is great, because my philosophy is we need as much information as we can get from as many different sources, as much tools to heal as there are people. So the reason I created this course was really a call from the amount of people that I work with and the types of people that I work with that tend to be sensitives, empaths, healers, and really also the nudging of Amanda, my creative director, who you'll meet later on this call. Recognizing there was this pattern going around, empaths couldn't find their power because of narcissistic relationships they had experienced or were experiencing. So if I kind of go back in my own personal history, I realized that my gift of intuition, my gift of being able to feel and sense what others were going through or are going through, which now plays out in my work, was also my greatest challenge. And I was really somebody who was very boundaryless in my late teens, early 20s especially. And that was the point when I was beginning to figure out that if you are somebody who identifies with being empathic, there are going to be some core gifts and challenges that will affect you. But how it shows up for all of us is very, very unique and very different. So I know that many of you who are on this call are already joining us for the online course, and some of you are here just because you're not going to take the course, but you want to see if there's anything that you can get from this call. So first things first, one of the things I have learned about the empath-narcissist dynamic is there is not a carbon copy out there of your story. So whatever you experienced, it will be highly personal to you. The type of empath you are is highly unique to you. And the type of narcissist that you may have been engaged in relationship with or met in your life is also going to be unique. So I think often when we hear these terms, empaths and narcissists, we try and understand them in a linear way. Okay, well, an empath is this and a narcissist is this. And while there are many similarities and traits and behaviors that identify those two labels, if you like, empath, narcissist, what I've also noticed is there are so many subtleties. It all depends on your personal history. It depends on what you have gone through, and it depends on where you're showing up in your life as to how you will exhibit those traits. And I often see online people getting a little caught in the definitions. So for example, my friend says she's an empath, but I also think she's a narcissist. And my philosophy is we can all be empathic, we can all be narcissistic, we can all have our moments. So there are times when we might behave in a very self-centered way, and then we look at how our self-centered behavior has perhaps negatively impacted or rocked somebody near us. Usually the empath will kind of catch that and go, oh God, I'm sorry, I was just going through something, and they will catch what happened and they will try and change their behavior in the future. The narcissist, this will often be their way of operating. They won't be caring about you. They won't be asking you questions about you. They won't be wondering how you're feeling. They'll just be annoyed if how you're feeling or what you're not able to give them in that moment is negatively impacting them. So my philosophy about empaths and narcissists and my experience around people who are empathic and narcissistic is it's all highly individual. I have my own stories of being caught in this dynamic, and I wouldn't wish what I went through in my experiences on anybody, but I've also heard much worse. I've heard stories that break your heart and that you can't believe. I've also heard stories where people are like, well, it wasn't good and it knocked me, but I'm not even sure that they were a narcissist. And so my thing is really, until you really look at the dynamic and look at your own part in the dynamic, it's very hard to get free of it. One of the things that can color many people's experience is not really wanting to believe that they were in a toxic or a controlling relationship. And this is very common for empaths. One of the things, and you'll hear me go into this in length in the course, but one of the things that defines an empath is wanting to see a happier, brighter, lighter world, either in the world outside you. So a lot of empaths become activists and crusaders on behalf of their community or the world in their work. A lot of empaths become healers, nurses, veterinarians. There's a directly caring component in what they do. And again, we all have the capacity to be empathic. It's just some of us exhibit certain tendencies that make us more of an empath perhaps than the average person that you meet on the street. So the trick for you is to be willing to look at why you gave your power away and when and how it happened with this narcissistic character, because that's the thing that I have seen be consistent in all of these stories. And also for myself, with my own healing journey around it, what I realized was, wow, I and we give our power away to these people for a short period of time or a long period of time. And even if the circumstances are trapping, so for example, let's say you have a boss and your problem is, this is your employment, this is where you get your paycheck from, you need to stay in that employment, you don't know how you can get away from it. The more you stay in that environment and that relationship, the more it starts to erode your self-belief, your self-esteem, your power base, because it really is a power dynamic. When you're involved with a narcissist, there is an uneven or unequal exchange of power going on. They are usually feeding off your energy in order to elevate their own power base, in order to take more of the status that they actually want. So before I go any further, I just want to let you know we will be doing some questions near the end of this broadcast. So we have some that have come in already from the portal, but if any of you are there in the chat room, feel free to pop some questions down there, and Amanda is going to pick a couple of them for us to answer nearer the end of the broadcast. But let's just take a moment together to breathe and just be for a second. It's interesting, as an intuitive, one of the things I notice is the parts of the body that tense up whenever we're dealing with these kinds of issues. And often in this issue, it really is the stomach. The stomach is where we connect to the relationships in our life. And so some of you on this broadcast right now, or coming to this broadcast, it wouldn't at all be unusual for you to have started to feel uncomfortable in your stomach. Because usually, until we have really given some attention to this topic, it can be very insidious and it can continue to play in the background of our lives. One of the things I noticed with this dynamic is it tends to replay. I know I've heard this from many of you over the years, and when I examined it in my own life, I saw that there were three key people that I went through it with. So I'll just give you an example of one of mine. And this is going back almost 20 years in my life. But it was my first love. And again, what I really learn now when I look back on it is it's not helpful to me to diagnose who he was. It's helpful for me to look at the dynamic. And what I mean by this is sometimes people get very locked into, well, were they a narcissist and were they a sociopath? And if you were experiencing things in the behavior that played out that pattern, that's enough. And that's important to look at, because your side of that pattern was allowing someone to dominate, control, belittle, shame, judge you. So that's what I mean by you have to really look at every single interaction on a case-by-case basis. There are some narcissists at large in the world right now in very big positions of power, which is also raising this issue for so many of us. And so why you have to identify your own story is to really understand what happened to you so that you can move beyond it. So what happened to me in this first instance was I thought I had met my true love, and we had this incredible connection, I thought, and I felt. And of course, I was young. I was in my early 20s. So you have a slightly new view of what love is at that time. But what I realized was my commitment to the relationship and my commitment to us moving in together overrode a couple of warning signs that I got early on. I was told by a few family and friends, why are you moving in so quickly? But it was just what I did. I was impulsive, and I was so in love with the love that we were having and lit up by the love that we were having, and so grateful because I'd been waiting, hoping for it for years, and it hadn't come along, that I managed to convince myself when these first early warning signs happened, oh, it will be okay. It will move on. So what happened in my experience was the wounds of my partner at that time would flare up and would aim themselves at me in very toxic ways. So for example, the biggest thing I can really put to you guys about one of the dynamics I identified in that was how there were things going on behind closed doors that no one else would have known about. And when they met him and they saw us as a couple, it all looked great. And he, could be very charming and very loving when it was public. But I would often go home after being at public events or parties and places where there were other people, and I wouldn't understand what had happened that night when we would get home and he would lay into me. Not physically, that only happened once near the end, but verbally. And he would verbally lacerate me for something I had said or done, usually some level of intimacy I was having with some other person. And I don't mean romantic intimacy, I just mean a connection I was having. So this went on for approximately the 9-10 months we lived together before I got the wherewithal to leave. But it would go on repeatedly, and what the pattern would be I would do something that I didn't understand. It would trigger him, and then he would turn it on me and usually not speak to me for about 2 to 3 days. We lived together, we worked together. So this would be very awkward. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I was boundaryless, and I was all about love. I was all about connection. I was all about, oh wow, that we can fix this, we can heal this. And I also had an early spiritual mindset, which was the mindset of we can break through any wounds. What I wasn't paying attention to was this wound did not want to be broken through. This was a dynamic that no matter how I reasoned with him or how I tried to change it, it didn't change. And gradually I got more and more energy sick. I lost my light. I started to keep certain friends away because it was easier. It caused less of a headache for me at home if I kept certain people away from me and from him. And so I got more and more isolated in the relationship, and he got more and more control. Luckily for me, this only lasted a year, and that's why I say this story is not so extreme. But it eroded me. But here's my point: I was already eroded. To be able to go into that relationship and to not really fully know who I was at that point, or to believe that aggression and verbalized judgment coming at me was okay. There was a part of me that was really being triggered by these wounds, that was really on the receiving end of things that he was saying that I, on some level, agreed with and felt responsible for. So your story might be very different to that. I have three. I found that this dynamic replayed 3 times in my life. The worst one was the middle one. This one was kind of the warm-up. The middle one was the worst. And then I had one final lesson that really mainly involved me losing money that I had lent to somebody, several $1,000s that I had lent, feeling like, oh, they really need this and I should give this to them because we're dating. And, it was one of those lessons. And the key that I noticed in all of these lessons for me and for the people that I work with is what keeps you there is a belief that it could or will change. And this is very much what I would call a younger empath belief, whether you're 50 still running that belief or whether you're 20. One of the things that empaths want to do is to see the light, to see love, to see connection, to see healing. So when you intersect that in a narcissistic relationship and you hang in there, hoping it will change, trying to change yourself as many ways as you can, sometimes completely eroding yourself because you realize there are parts of you that they do not want in the room. And it costs you in a really big way if those parts of you show up. It plays into some element of our own psyche. In the same way that empaths can have trouble with boundaries because they want to stand for connection and they want love and they want to connect, it's the same around self-belief, self-esteem. Many empaths, their role can be helping others, healing others, and they perhaps haven't had the time to really sit with that part of the self that's like, well, what if I wasn't useful to other people? And what if I didn't do this thing that I do? And how would I really feel inside myself? And what I've noticed is it kind of comes back to an alignment with suffering. Empaths have a very big shock on this planet when they realize how much suffering is here, because empaths tend to be a little bit wired towards the light, wanting to bring illumination, light, love. And the truth is, this planet is very diverse. As a channeler, I've had many conversations with my guides about how do we deal with the dark and the light on this planet. And one of the things empaths have to get really good at is boundaries. They have to get really good at knowing which energy is for them and which energy isn't for them. And usually the narcissist is the greatest teacher of this dynamic, which is why so many of us have found we've ended up with them as parents or as bosses or as friends or as lovers. Some people have had all of those relationships. And what I've seen time and time again is there is something inside us that is magnetic to that dynamic. Something about owning our power, owning our self-esteem, owning our own will. Because if you think about it, the one thing that narcissists are really good at is serving their own will and serving their own needs. I know many of the people that I've spoken to, and this showed up for me too, consciously or unconsciously were attracted to the narcissist's power. This powerful, charismatic person who knew their own mind. Often the reason there was an attraction to that person, whether it was as friend, employer, business partner, it's different when it's your family, your parent, that's a whole other equation. But if you're attracted to that, it's usually because there's a part of you that has never really owned your own decision making. So if you think about what happens with a narcissist, to stay in that relationship, you have to learn to ignore your inner needs and put theirs first. This is classic empath behavior. Many empaths and healers that I know will walk into a room and go, oh, wow, this feels really heavy in here. I'm really tired, but you know what? If I listen to her and if I make him laugh and if I give him something that he might need, maybe the room's going to lift. So that's often how empaths end up in the narcissist dynamic. And the lesson that the dynamic can teach us when we get out of it and we recover is, what if we owned our power without having to give it away? What if we didn't have to give away our power to these relationships? So the narcissist is like the mother of all lessons. And I say this, and I'm very mindful, some of you will be watching this broadcast and you might be right in the middle of one of these relationships now. And I get that it's complicated when it's family or when they're a co-parent of a child. I get that there are certain arrangements that you can't just easily walk away from. And that's something that we do look at in detail in the course. But one of the things that you must understand and that we all must understand in order to recover is usually your level of power is greater than that of the narcissist. I get that that might be hard to believe because you think, well, hang on a second, they were like this domineering force. Remember that to externally try and dominate is usually most of the time coming from a deep place inside where that person feels or is afraid they will feel powerless. The reason narcissists like empaths is because the empath can be very useful in many ways that the narcissist does not feel the world or does not sense the world. You know, some of you may have been the person to your narcissist that regretted certain things that you said or explained to them that you then saw them use negatively toward other people. So it's a very intense relationship, and one that even when you're out of it for some months or years, I found the recovery process takes quite a time, and it involves not only having healthy relationships outside you, but really asking the question, how could I have lost myself that much? How and why could I give myself away to that person that much? So I have this term I use with empaths, and it's called the abandoned self. In order for an empath to be a good empath and serve others, there are parts of the self that we have to abandon in order to do it. So for example, let's say your sister likes to be the funny one in the room and makes it very clear to you that if you're ever funny, you're going to get punished. Then you as the empath, for the sake of harmony, for the sake of peace, for the sake of a lighter, brighter room with less conflict in it, will learn, oh, okay, well, I won't be funny whenever she's around. I'll dim that part of myself down. I'll edit that part of myself out. Now, this, might be fine for one evening with one aspect of yourself, but what the narcissist relationship asks you to do is to close down many parts of yourself. It basically asks you to abandon many parts of yourself. So imagine parts of you were like big skyscrapers. The narcissist relationship, especially one that's ongoing, will ask you to smash each of those skyscrapers down yourself. And one by one, you smash down all of the height and all of the building that you are, which is why when you come out of a narcissist relationship, you usually do not know who you are, do not know what happened, and can't believe that you're in the place that you're in, and how this relationship began got you to this point. Now, again, we can look at this differently. It's slightly different with family. It's slightly different with employers than it is with chosen friendships or relationships or lovers. But what I have seen in every case, in every person that I've worked with, and I've also looked at this with my own history, is at some level we were abandoning ourselves willingly to let the light or the power or the fuel shine through them. Now, don't mistake this for great generosity. I don't think it comes from being the most angelic person in the world who's like, oh, I would just give them all the space. I don't think it comes from that at all. Some people are exceptionally kind and they live to serve, and other people have mixed up their role. This idea that you have to let everybody else rise and shine and you should keep quiet. It doesn't have to be that way. That's a win-lose dynamic. So one of the things that I've noticed that is perhaps one of the final stages in the recovery journey for those who've been through this empath-narcissist dynamic, you have to re-own your power, your charisma, and your joy without fear that you are either going to let those things make you treat others in the destructive or the negative ways that you've seen your narcissist do it. So, for example, if you always thought that, your mother, who's the narcissist, was far more charismatic and powerful than you, then you may have looked at charisma and power and gone, oh my God, if that's what charisma and power looks like, and then you punish people behind the scenes or you're mean to people behind the scenes, I don't want that. I can't go there. I'm just going to avoid that. So this is why the healing journey takes some time, because essentially what you're doing is you're rebuilding all of those skyscrapers in your life. You're having to rebuild the part of you that's funny, because now you're not with that narcissist that told you to never be funny. It has to slowly come back. One of the things I know I lost, and I've heard this from several other people, I lost my sense of humor for quite a while. In my middle relationship, the worst one, which took about 18 months initially to recover from, and probably many more years. And I still noticed, even in the delivery of this course and the creation of this course, I still noticed reverberations in revisiting every module that we went through in the course. I really relived some of what I had gone through, and was able to see how there can always be this low-level fear or anxiety that if you become your full self, somebody is going to attack or punish you. And the truth is, we live in a world where anything can happen, but the shadow of the narcissism gets inside your mind, gets inside your cells, stops you becoming who you're here to be. So one of the things I've done over the years when I've worked more intensively with people on this dynamic is to just slowly but surely reinvite them back to their power, and to recognize there was something in the narcissist that you polarized. And it was a level of their power or a level of their will. So a part of you comes away from it and goes, okay, well, I must never be willful because I was this close to someone whose will I saw used in destructive ways. And what you have to understand is, unless you take an Am I a Narcissist test online and you come out with a really high score, you aren't the narcissist. But your fear of those moments where you take your power, where you own your charisma, that's the body's trauma memory kicking off, going, oh, I don't know if I can be this. And as we gradually heal our trauma, which happens through awareness, attention, love and support, good people around us, and a regime that we set up in our life that, it might be 7 days a week you do something around this, or it might just be once a week you agree to love the part of yourself that felt unloved enough that it was okay for somebody to treat you the way that they did. Because whether it's your job, whether it's family, whether it's a chosen relationship like friend or lover or partner or husband or wife, the part of you that stays aligned with the narcissist during that relationship, it's a relationship of erosion of the self. Because this person is telling you, oh no, there isn't room for two of us in this room. There isn't room for two of us. It's just going to be me. But part of the honesty is recognizing you were attracted to something there. There was something in you that was attracted to being in or learning from that dynamic. So this is why I call it a power dynamic. And yes, as I said at the beginning, we can all have narcissistic moments, we can all have empathic moments, but this is really a dynamic that I've seen affect those of you that call yourself empaths or refer to yourself as empaths. Those of you that sense and feel what's going on before you perhaps mentally understand what's going on, or somebody walks into a room and you can tell how they're feeling even though they say they're fine. You're like, no, that's not what I'm feeling. You don't feel fine at all. Your words and your face are telling me one thing, and what I'm feeling in your body is another. This is the other reason that narcissists like empaths, because empaths do a lot of work around their energy field for and with them that they perhaps are neglecting themselves. But the problem is, narcissists Real textbook narcissists, ones who are really far up the scale, their healing is not your job. And it can be quite impossible with some cases. It really depends on how along the scale they are. But the empath will often bleed themselves dry, trying to change the dynamic, trying to bring light to the dynamic. So for those of you who aren't taking the course, if you have a pen and paper handy, you might just want to jot down this term, the abandoned self, and ask yourself, what parts of myself have I abandoned to become more convenient for others? Now, I think this is true for all of us as human beings. We live in a world where there's strong conditioning, strong societal ideas about who we should or shouldn't be. But often in these narcissist-empath relationships, it really shows up. The relationship where you know you can't be your full, authentic self because they don't want you to be, and you've agreed to put yourself in this kind of stranglehold with them and in what they want you to be and who they want you to be. So at some level, you abandon who you are and who you need to be in order to serve their agenda. And if you're lucky, if you're in the group that, like myself, you get energy sick and you start to realize, and you've had enough good relationships in your life to know, oh, there's something off here. Then you get out of the relationship and you can see it everywhere you go. I'm now really good at seeing narcissistic personality types, but I didn't used to be. I used to see their soul. I used to see their potential. I didn't pay enough attention to the behavior. So empaths really have to get very real about what they're seeing, not what they're hoping for. And this is what can keep an empath in one of these relationships. Wishing, hoping, praying it will change, saying, well, you know, he got really vulnerable 3 weeks ago and I could tell he was upset and he's been really cold again for 3 weeks, but I know he's wounded. The empath has to learn everybody's wounded. Everybody's wounded, all of us. Is it really your job to take that person on? And my test around, are you the person to heal someone's wounds, is pay attention and make an assessment. Are you healing their wounds? Have you seen actual progress over the year that you've been together? And if you haven't, then you could be sending all of your energy into a place that it's not alchemizing or transforming. Let's take another breath together. Guys, it's good to be with you, but it's interesting. I'm trying to speed through a few of these topics, and it's a dense and intense topic. It's certainly not a topic that many of us look forward to. For example, I've done many courses in my life, many workshops, and thanks to Amanda pushing me to do this one, I didn't really realize until we were in it how dark and intense this issue is. But what I'm really clear about as we've gone through and mapped out this journey is there are two things that really show up in this dynamic for everybody. It's fear of the shadow of the self, and playing that out through a narcissist, through somebody who we can be the victim from. And the victim state is quite normal when you've been in this dynamic, by the way. So if you're there right now, don't beat yourself up. All I'm saying is there comes a point when you move out of the victim stage. It might take years, but it will take until you have understood and healed the aspects that you're in and feel like you have some power back and that that person didn't take everything from you. They may leave a scar, that's for sure. And they may leave a memory in your body that you're like, oh, okay, if I ever see anybody like that again, I know not to tango with them. But what I've seen time and time again with the people who I've noticed can come through the recovery is you get really strong and you become a good advocate for boundaries for others. And my philosophy on whether or not narcissists can heal is it really depends on how far along they are and their life circumstances. But is it the job of the empath who they go head to head with? Usually not at all. Not unless the narcissist themselves has some conscious awareness of their own behaviors and is also working with other people on it. Can the empath heal the narcissist by trying to stay with them and love them and send them energy. No, it's usually a one-way street. It's usually you pouring your energy down a drain, depleting more of your own life force. And the pain of attachment is what often stops an empath walking away sooner, because empaths love to love. They love to be connected. They're also good at working with wounds. So they have their wounded person. We're also wounded, but this person's wounds are perhaps more evident, or they're playing out through your body a lot more because they're throwing them back at you. The end of the empath-narcissist relationship is usually the end of suffering in relationships. I don't mean the kind of suffering that comes through grief. We lose a loved one. There can be sadness. There can be feelings of pain around the fact that they're gone. That's different to drama and toxicity that plays out backwards and forwards, and you feeling you're being yanked around by another person. So usually the end of the relationship, as you get to the end, one of the takeaways is, I don't need to suffer at the hands of another human being, and I don't need their suffering to infect my life and cause me to suffer. Let's just take a couple of breaths together. So for those of you who are new to my work, you may notice that at times I'm speaking linearly, and at times I speak in circles, and it's not a consciously directed thing. This is what I've come to understand about life. It's a spiral path of healing, and the words that intuitively come to me whenever I'm working with people on topics, they tend to be taking us in a circle in and around the layers of what we're surfacing, because we can't always take someone's pain away for them, any of us. But what we can do is create a space, a container, new levels of understanding for them, and new tools, new tips that can kind of help somebody come together. So that's why you'll notice I speak in a circular way sometimes, and one thought leads on to another as we kind of look at the main body of this. And that's very much how I delivered the course, although the course is broken down into modules, and we have worksheets for each module so that you can get very grounded with what you're learning. But for those of you who've been with us tonight, before we go to the questions in a moment, I would ask you to think about, what parts of yourself did you have to abandon in your empath-narcissist relationship? Are they parts of you that you'd never really fully fleshed out in the world? And what part of your fear in life up to that point wasn't letting you stand proud? Because the other thing I've noticed, people who have been with narcissists, when they heal from the relationship, while they don't want to behave the way a narcissist did, they don't necessarily want to behave in a cold, detached, or destructive way, they got up close to someone who didn't mind exercising their own personal will. And this is something that empaths usually have to learn. An empath has to learn, okay, what's my will? What do I need? Yes, I know I can help others or move energy for others, or whether I'm doing that through conversation or meditation, what do I need? Just as a human being, what do I need to come back to for me? And what's my personal self need right now? And usually the empath is abandoning their self enough that they can get immersed and enmeshed in one of these toxic relationships to start with. So I think this would be a great time to look at some of your questions. So I would love to invite Amanda onto the call. So Amanda is in the UK right now, so it's pretty late for her. And Amanda is the creative director for Lee Harris Energy. And she co-produced this course with me, and has her own experiences around this dynamic too. So Amanda, welcome.
Thank you, Lee. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and feel this all kicking off. It's really tremendous.
Yeah, we've been waiting for you guys for a while, because we launched. We've been working on this for almost 6 months, and we launched this a couple of weeks ago. And especially as you've all been piling into the private Facebook group that we created, we can feel all the energy going. So I'm really glad that we're now at the point where we can start to serve you with modules and a structure around your healing. So I'm glad you were able to stay awake for us, Amanda.
I don't think I could have slept. I think I would have felt you all. But there's some really great questions that have come through. So shall I read some of them to you?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. This one picks up on the abandoned self. I would like to hear more about the connection between the abandoned self and our identity. Paying attention to the abandoned self has led me to notice that certain parts of my identity, like being a nice person, being a good person, seem entangled in the misstep of self-abandonment. I often notice this because of falling for narcissistic manipulations that are playing on these kind of identity traits. Can you help here?
It's a great question. The thing that comes to me immediately with you is the safety of those roles, or the perceived safety of those roles. I think probably for me, I thought, oh, being loving is safe. And then I had some relationships where I was like, oh, no, you mustn't be loving with some of these people because it will drag you down a road that you don't want to go. So I think safety is at the core for so many of us around our communal relationships. If you go back in history, we were dependent on each other in a bigger way than we are right now. We lived more tribally, and we needed every person in the community to somehow be connected to us. And if you look at some of the barbaric stuff that happened historically, people were more afraid of what other people could do to each other. So I think this plays out now slightly more subtly. People aren't necessarily beheading each other, but at the same time, people can feel that being ostracized, whether it's through looking at someone's Facebook page and feeling excluded, or playing out something with a friend that's speaking badly of you and you feel excluded or challenged by what's going on in those dynamics. So remember that your gift is to feel what other people are feeling. So one of the things that's tricky about programming yourself as, oh, I will be a good person, is if your empath side is triggering that response every time you feel somebody in need around you, then it is a very unconscious response. You're going to feel someone's wound. You might personally be tired or have made a decision that you need to go home by yourself that night, but suddenly their wound is in the room. So you spend an hour with them in order to follow this directive of be a good person. I would bring it right back to the beginning of your question, which is, in being a good person, do you ever abandon yourself? It's when the body says no, but the mind or the voice says yes. So for example, this example I gave a second ago, you're here with this friend, you know you've got to go home, you know you're exhausted, you have a really full day tomorrow, you've made commitments. This friend is really depleted and asks for your help. You could say no, and you probably should say no based on your own body, but you prioritize their self, their feelings over your own needs. This can also be because life wasn't safe for you. So for example, if your reaction to trauma as a kid, either because you were born to extreme parenting like alcoholic parents, or parents that had rage attacks at you, or you were just so sensitive that even if the behavior wasn't that overt, you just felt quite alarmed by the energy of the world, it can become a coping mechanism or a safety mechanism to get you through life safely. But we all evolve and grow, and we all change. So that role becomes a little tight. So for you, I would ask yourself, how many times do you have to abandon looking after this vehicle, looking after your body, looking after your senses and what it might need from you to keep going through life, in order to serve the need of somebody outside you who triggers your, I must be a good girl, I must be a good person thing? Because the cost can lead to depression, burnout, going home and feeling just isolated and like you've got nothing left to give, and you don't even want to speak to a friend who might help you because you've got no energy and you don't know if you can trust getting involved in that relationship. You have to trust that people will find the help they need. I really believe this. If you have a friend who says, oh, can we speak tonight? I'm really distressed. And you know you can't. You'll know if it's an emergency. And especially if that's a friend who you know this goes on with them, and they also know that you helping them is something that brings them light, You could say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're distressed. I've had a really rough few days and I'm pretty exhausted. Can we speak tomorrow or the day after? Two things in that. Number one, you're not just slamming the door in their face. But number two, you'll find that a day or two later, that person's emergency will have subsided, or they'll have found someone else. People find the people they need if they're desperate. And I really also believe and experience the times when I bypass myself in that way, it's an emergency. It's like, oh, this friend, oh no, I can tell I have to give to this person. But if you're on auto response about that, you not only end up having nothing left to give to others, but life starts to feel very empty, starts to feel very black. And what can happen is you feel very dark when you're alone because you've been helping others with the darkness and the shadows to such a degree that you haven't been filling yourself back up, or you haven't got relationships where, oh, wow, they have a program of being a good girl too. We get on and we tend to share our gifts. Like, I know that whenever I give stuff to her, it kind of, if I zoom out and look at the relationship balance over the last few years, she's always helping me and lifting me. So it's very even. So you must have even relationships in your life if you're wired that sensitively, and look at the part of you that has wired the word, I'm responsible for others, into your head. I always say, if you're an irresponsible person, by all means, try being responsible for a month. But if you're someone who already naturally feels responsible for others, you're going to have to go against that for a while. And every time your mind goes, oh my God, I should help her, try and listen to your body, and just before you go into the impulse of being the good girl and the helper, go, okay, I can help them in a minute. Okay, I'll help them in 10 minutes. It's the same thing as the addict brain. You help the addict brain by going, okay, well, you can have that thing you're craving in 20 minutes. And then 20 minutes later, the craving has often gone away. It's the same with being a helper. If you can just go, okay, I'll help them in 20 minutes, or I'll call them back in 20 minutes, wait and let your own body tell you where it's at. You might call them back, but you might call them back and say, Jean, I'm really exhausted today. I've got 10 minutes and then I need to go to sleep. How can I help? And then you put a parameter on how much you can give, but you're going to have to learn to control that dial a little bit, because at the moment it's like a jackpot machine that other people are pulling and you're just spewing out the coins, and eventually your machine's going to be empty. So thank you for that question. It was a good one. And I hope that something in the answer can help you move forward.
Great, Lee. The next question I've got is when there's a narcissist in the family, and it says, I have had problems with narcissists over the years. They make me very angry because my father was one too. Now when I encounter one, I walk away or try to keep my distance. It is getting difficult, however, for there is someone in my close environment, in my case, the mother of my grandchildren, is a narcissist. I find this very difficult to deal with because I feel so powerless at times. Could you help here?
So first of all, the anger about your father, let that be there as much as you need to be. And it sounds like you're already in touch with it, but the anger is the part of you that's angry that dynamic happened to you, angry that you were subjected to what you were subjected to, and injustice. That's the big word that kind of floats across for me when I listen to you talk about the anger of your father, the injustice of what he got away with and how he affected you and others. So what I will say is this: if you could have had a grandmother in your midst when you were going through that with your father, who held the light for you and held a certain level of balance for you, you probably would have survived your childhood better. And maybe there was someone in your life that you can say, actually, Lee, I had this person. So try to remember that you're there for the kids. And equally, what I would say to you about your daughter-in-law, or the mother of your grandchildren rather, is you don't have to be nice. You don't want to be aggravating, because I get that you don't want to upset the dynamic. I get that you don't want to threaten your ability to see your grandchildren. And usually narcissists like to punish and take things away from you if you upset them or challenge them. However, don't waste any of your warmth or love on her unless you see some signs that there is a request for that. And hold your love and warmth for the kids, because we don't really know how these kids are going to go. If one of their parents is that narcissistic, then it could be that one of the kids aligns with that a bit more, or it could be that neither of them do. But if neither of them do, or if one of them doesn't, having really good, loving, strong examples around them, it's going to be important, because at the moment the kids are probably at the age where they can't differentiate what's going on. They're all in the energy. They're not sitting back going, oh, my mother's a bit selfish and narcissistic. They haven't yet developed an adult's eye view of behavior patterns, but they're in them and they're absorbing them, and the energy is affecting them. So the reason I say you don't have to be warm, and I do get this is complicated, by the way. I get this isn't a wave a magic wand solution kind of scenario you're in. I learned something years ago, and it still blows my mind that it works, but it does. I'll share it with you guys. Having turned up at many hotels around the world, knowing I've got, anything from 30 to 100 or more people coming into that hotel that weekend or that night to do workshop with me, I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to going around the world, and I'm usually friendly to anybody I meet in a shop or a hotel desk. Or I did a lot of customer service jobs in my early life, and I took pride in customer service. So I never quite get it when you meet people who are really rude, but it happens. However, I become very pissy when I turn up at a hotel and somebody is rude to me at the desk. And I don't just mean not nice, I just mean rude. And it's happened a few times when I know I'm bringing 30 to 100 people into that hotel for a healing workshop. It annoys me, because I'm responsible for those people and their experience, and I'm spending a lot of money and effort bringing all those people in. But what I learned was this: you turn up at the hotel desk and the person is cold with you. And for example, it's like, hello, I'm here to check in to my room. Hold on a second, I'm just busy. And they're like on the computer, and you're like, okay. And what's your name? Don't look at me, just cold and kind of aggressive edge. What I've learned to do, I used to be extra nice to those people, not anymore. I mirror their tone. I'm not rude to them, I don't judge them, but I mirror their tone. So for example, I go, Harris, and what's your first name? Lee. It's amazing. If you mirror their tone, what happens to me every time is the person slightly softens. I'm not saying they become the friendliest person in the world, but it's like if they are completely walling me out, not contacting me being nice is not going to contact them. And me sending an energy to them that they don't recognize and can't hear is not going to contact them. They're in a cold, sharp energy. So I, without pushing it, faking it, or I just kind of mirror. I go, yes, here to check in. Yes. And suddenly, I don't know what it is. It's like they understand you, they hear you, and then they kind of soften a little bit and open, and it happens to me every time. So think about that example and how it could apply with her. Now, I get that, you have to see her regularly, but still, don't waste any of your warm and fuzzy on her. Don't be rude, but see what happens if you start to treat her in a certain way and treat your grandchildren in a different way. Now, we do this all the time anyway. You see the way that people are to kids versus adults. We're used to changing that mode, but there might be some heartbreak for you that this has shown up again in your family. And what it's doing is tapping on what happened with your father. So journaling more about what happened to you with your father whenever these feelings come up, writing up you on a piece of paper, whatever you want to do. Give yourself permission to feel what you want to feel and express what you need to express, because you certainly weren't allowed to do that with your father. So there's something in you that wants to express itself. And I suspect you will find a way to not be bullied by the mother of those grandkids, because A, those grandkids need you, and B, when they grow up, you're not going to have to deal with this. You're not going to have to deal with her in a certain amount of years from now. So don't believe that you have to kowtow to her way of being, because you won't be the only one in the room who's not liking it or who is struggling with it. So if you can be an example of being in the room and kind of treat her with a certain level of disinterest, which may feel foreign to you because you like to be nice to people, but people show you who they are. And if we don't listen and we try and make them someone other than they're showing us, or we try and cajole them into being someone else, we tend to only cost ourselves. So I know that's a really complex question you threw in. It's a great question. I hope that maybe one or two of the things that I've said can give you some roads to travel on. But I would really say, remember you're there for the grandkids, and let that be your overriding force when you're upset, annoyed, or uncomfortable that you have to go and deal with her. But look at dealing with her in a different way and see what happens. Experiment with it. Thank you.
Lee, I'm thinking one more question.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one about romantic relationships and healing deep wounds. They ask, my way of dealing with these types of relationships was to avoid men completely. No more romantic relationships for me. I am okay with this, but sometimes I wonder if this is healthy. Any suggestions? Men terrify me. My relationships ended violently and badly.
So what I get with you is, I'm curious what body-based healing work that you have done. I definitely found therapy beneficial myself. I think the regularity of therapy can really help you unpack things. But also body-based healing. I don't have your experience, but the kind of my biggest experience with a narcissist was an intimate relationship, and it left me kind of sexually frozen for a year or so. And I remember going to work with a couple of tantric therapists that had been highly recommended. It wasn't necessarily overtly sexual work that we did. It was more just to help me feel safe in my body again around all of this stuff. And so in your case, which sounds very extreme and went on for a long time, whatever rehabilitation work you can do to help your body recover from some of the wounding, I would recommend being very aggressive about the way you tackle that. And what I mean by that word aggressive, because it can sound like an angry word, I mean, if nothing else, in this next 12 months, if you went, okay, this next 12 months, I'm going to do something twice a month to help reset my body, specifically about what I went through. Now, I get that part of you might be like, I just want to move on. I want to forget about the past. But I've found if you're willing to go and look at the past, but you do it in a very ordered and structured way, it can really shift things for you in a powerful way. You know that every 2 weeks you're having this healing session. That's where you bring all of your emotions, all of the bruising, and somebody helps you open that out. You're going to be surprised how much can change in your body, because the very fact you're even questioning this tells me that you are clear that you would like another relationship. And all the people I've both known in my life and worked with who have gone through sexual abuse or violence and have then found relationships, they've found relationships where all of that can be there. The person that they're with loves them and understands them and their past enough that if one night they're having difficulty being touched, that person will just wait and will be there for that and will let that be part of the relationship. The other thing that I know is true about relationships is we tend to find someone who has equal light and equal wounds, equal gifts and equal challenges in their life. This doesn't mean that your partner may have had your life story. Usually that's not how it works. But for example, the pain that they have felt in their life is at some level equal to the pain that you have felt in your life. And when you come together, you start to, through love and through connection, help each other heal and release that. So I believe you can feel safe again in relationship without ignoring the fact that you've had some real breaches of safety that are going to need some work and some attention. And they may always want to have a conversation with you. They may really heal on a cellular level, but I talk about the scar. Is it a scar or is it a deep flesh wound? And I think we have our scars to remind us what we went through so that we can be wise about our decisions in the future. But it doesn't mean we're haunted on a daily basis. So for you, I would say the question shows a desire to experience relationship again. There are a lot of good men out there and women too. And there are also a lot of people who've been through this kind of thing. So you may end up with someone who has a deep understanding of what it is to feel traumatized by another person in their life and is willing to give you the space and the time to go through that. So I will finish your question and I guess this broadcast with this. With my middle narc relationship, it was so dark when I got out of it, and it was such a dark 6 to 9 months for me. I cried every day for 6 months. I didn't know what the hell had happened to me. I didn't know how I'd got dragged into it. That I didn't know if I could live. I didn't know if I wanted to live. There was a week where I really said, well, if this is the amount of pain that I'm in, I don't know if I can go on. But what pulled me through it, and what was my kind of final decision that week, was realizing, well, if this is as low as I've gone, I'm curious to see where I can go from this when I rebuild, because I didn't know I could ever feel that low in life or about myself. And it's true. I can say to you that, almost a decade later, I haven't ever felt as much ownership of who I am inside myself. And like any human being, there are challenges, there are ups and downs, things can affect you. But in general, I realized that before that relationship, I was really loaning myself out to people much more than I should have, which was why I was able to give myself to a toxic dynamic. So for you, I would say, ask yourself, okay, there's a part of me that knows that she wants relationship. So I trust that all other parts of me, all other skyscrapers, can slowly rebuild themselves. Just because one person wanted me to smash them down and I agreed, doesn't mean everyone else in the world is like that. And if you really commit to your own personal healing journey, that's where the medicine is. And that's how you learn not to get into that dynamic again, because you not only see the signs in them, you also are no longer as permeable to the hooks that the toxic relationship used to be able to yank or pull in you. So it's really uncovering what parts of me have I abandoned. And one of the parts of you that doesn't want to be abandoned right now is the part of you that wants a relationship again. So good for you. And I would give everything you have to making that happen in the coming year. Amanda, thank you for being with us and for giving us those questions.
It was great to be here, Lee.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll see you on Monday onwards when we start the course again. But thanks for being here. And to all of you who've tuned in, thank you for being here. I hope that this spiral that we've just done through some of the themes of empaths versus narcissists can be a takeaway for you if you're not joining us on the course. And if you are joining us on the course, we have all of these modules that we will be going through. Every few days, you will get new video teaching. We have worksheets so that you can really identify who you are as we move through each dynamic and what your story was, and to see how to fully recover your power. That's really what the intention of this course was. It's not the most, it's not the most shiny or happy looking topic when you see it there written down, empaths versus narcissists. I think it can give you a bit of a recoil in the body. And we specifically chose the image that's on the poster. It was a photo that was taken a couple of years ago that Amanda found, because I think there is a real mirroring around power that goes on in that relationship, which was why we wanted to use the mirror image. So for those of you who are taking the course with us, thank you for kicking off with us tonight. And I look forward to walking you through each module step by step, in a way that's going to be a safe and warm container for you to really just give yourself to this topic to see what new levels of power and energy you can reclaim for yourself. And for any of you who are interested in learning more about the course, we're going to put a screen up in a second, and you'll be able to see the website address to find that. And we're going to keep our discount offer open for the next 24 hours. So if you want to go and check out the course and you feel like joining us, we would love to have you. And we'll leave this title up on the screen for you for a few more minutes. But thanks everyone for tuning in today. I wish you lots of love. And I want you to remember that you're really powerful, and that if you go through these kinds of power dynamics, there has to be an alignment in you around power, but healthy power that got you into that dynamic in the first place. So even if right now you're feeling like a victim, or that's the part or the stage of the journey that you're in, know that you can come through it. I'm not the only person who is testament to that. There are so many of us all over the world. So Lots of love, all of you, and thanks again for tuning in today.